in Double Dragon, they have the Rosetta Stone in there just as because it was more recognizable than how they originally titled it in Double Dragon 3.
Double Dragon 3, I almost made it out of the first room once.
Double Dragon 3, The Legend of Bimmy and Jimmy.
It's like all of them, though, right? Not just 3. They're all Bimmy. They're all Jimmy.
No. Double Dragon 3, Bimmy and Jimmy is straight up just Bimmy and Jimmy. It's like the other ones are Billy and Jimmy, but Bimmy and Jimmy, that's their legend.
What about Jimmy and Jammies?
Doesn't exist, bro.
Oh.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Also, sorry in advance for screwing up the story of Exodus. I'm pretty certain we butchered that. Hi, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be about written stone tablets. Tablets with words and other phrases that are on there that have lasted throughout the course and history of time. Some of these have been so influential that they've been we have them in real life and in fiction. So before we get started, in order to get through this and explain some of this stuff, let's just go around the place and introduce each other. Once again, my name is Leo. I am the Geek Scorpio.
My name is Brandon, and I am also known as Tomato Man with a 7.
Kyle, also known as K-Bye.
Steven, also known as Nibblesnarf.
All right. Now, before we get started, let's take a quick trip to the magical merch booth. Hi everyone, this is Leo, the Geek Scorpio. The Bard has stepped out for a while, but I wanted to take this time to thank all of our fans for supporting this podcast. Thanks to your help, we managed to bring some awareness and get some charitable donations to Simply Cats. Keep an ear out as we have something planned in November for Extra Life. Thank you once again for all of your support, and now, back to the show. So, with this, this is an interesting subject that we've had. There was a video that we made back for Gaming Theater Presents, and I'll put the link into the description for you guys if you want to check it out, about written stone tablets. Now, in short, written stone tablets, they have been around for literally centuries, decades, and even millennia, which was a weird order to say that, but I already did that. So, anywho, when you have these stone tablets, anything that's written in there is written to basically stand the test of time. There's a saying that out there called written in stone, and that's basically what it means. That it's just whatever you write down is going to always stick around. When you have these things, there's some of our greatest stories have been passed down from history and generation because of this, especially anything that's in a lot of stories from the BC era. Mostly it's just these are the rules, and it's just easier to put in stone so everyone understands this cannot be changed. Now, we're going to go over a couple of ones that are both from fiction and non-fiction ones that have been around the world. And I think the best way to start is from one of the earliest stone tablet texts that we have, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest stories that we have as in history. And it's just the story of, Gilgamesh. He's a cool dude, but the reason why we have it is that Gilgamesh is featured in one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, Babylon. And one of the things about that is a lot of what they would do is that they would do carvings and cartouches onto like clay tablets. And when they have these clay tablets, and after they write them out, when they dry, they become solid. But in some cases, they would actually carve cuneiform. That's the name of their writing style. The cuneiform writing into different pieces of stone, especially on ziggurats and other large permanent buildings that they have. And that's one of the reasons why the Epic of Gilgamesh has been passed down for so long, is because it's in stone. Now, I think another one of these stone ones that I want to go over, something that I find really interesting, is and this is one that almost everyone has heard of, at least one way or another, is the Rosetta Stone.
Yes. Rosetta Stone is one of the most common languages. Actually, if anybody in today's day and age as well would also know too that the Rosetta Stone is now it's a program, but it helps you teach his languages, which is kind of funny when you say that though. But yes, the Rosetta Stone, I believe the origination of that too was ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic and Demotic, I think is how you pronounce it. Demotic.
Demotic.
Demotic, yeah, which which respectively, of course, this is all falls underneath ancient Greek. I mean, this all starts somewhere and pretty much goes from there. And I can't remember which it was first, because my knowledge of the ancients is unfortunately a little bit limited in that regards. But yeah, like we talk about that, the Rosetta Stone. That's a very common one that to this day and age is still. I think it was created in BC, somewhere in the hundreds. I can't remember exactly when, but I do know it was found slightly before 1800. I think just like it was like August or July, somewhere in that ballpark range when it was found. But yeah, it's like when we talk about the Rosetta Stone, though, that's one of the more common ones you hear in this day and age. It's also commonly used in video games too, which is another reason why you hear that term. You're like, oh, Rosetta Stone. Yeah, we know what that is. Anybody who plays Final Fantasy will know Rosetta Stone was used to help identify the language of the Fenians in Final Fantasy 1. And I think it was a common theme throughout most of the Final Fantasies after that. There are other games that had it too, though. But
Yeah,
feel free to chime in.
yeah,
on that,
you
Leo.
find it in the various other games. They retitled Double Dragon 3 to be the Rosetta Stone.
That's true. Forgot about that one.
And also it's in Full Metal Furies. It has it in there. And the Rosetta Stone is how you unlock puzzles to get to the other side for it. Because a lot of that game's kind of locked, and to unlock it, you have to solve the riddles that are on the Rosetta Stones. Now, the actual Rosetta Stone is actually a pretty cool item. Because what it is that it's Steve's right with this. It's a large stone with different stone carvings that are done. That was around 200 BCE, and they figured that King Ptolemy was the one that was around it. So what it is that they have a poem inside there that was written. If I recall, feel free to at me on this one if I got this one horribly wrong. But I recall that it is a inscription and an inscription about a poem for Cleopatra. The thing with the Rosetta Stone is that it's written in a form of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, above that hieroglyphs, though, is another set of translation, and then it's the same poem written in another language for a third language on that, and it's about 4 or 5 languages deep. Now, the top one is written in a form of ancient Greek. There's a second set of Greek writing underneath it, though. So it's the same poem rewritten time after time after time after time, and roughly about during the Napoleonic Wars, one of Napoleon's soldiers found this tablet there, and grabbed it and kept it during the war. After the war was over, what he would do is on his off time, if he ever while he was doing all of his regular stuff, on his off time, one of the things that he would do is just take a look at the stone and try to translate it. And his work is how we get some of the starting works for understanding Egyptian languages. Because the thing is that if you're trying to translate a language, and there's linguistics out there all the way from the 60s who wrote Klingon, and you have Elven, which is done by Tolkien. These languages and there's people out there who just write and understand how. If you understand how to proceed with a language, you can create your own language. The reason why the Rosetta Stone is so fantastic is because people who created these languages back then in ancient times wrote this poem down, not realizing it's the gateway for translating ancient works. Because if you can translate one of the languages, it's the same poem underneath it, and you can translate that, and then you can translate that, you can translate that. It's one of the ways that we sort of learn other languages is through writings, but you need something that's very familiar. A lot of missionaries, when they do missionary work, will get especially for like Christian missionaries, will have a version of the Bible, but written in the language of the place that they're going, because it's easier, because they already know what's in it. But this way they can work with the translation. But yeah, the Rosetta Stone is famous because it's in all these other places, because it's because that's where we get a quick reference of translations. And it took the guy decades to finally translate like 1 or 2 of the things, and people took over later. But he did it, got it translated.
It only takes one.
It really does.
I think the current Rosetta Stone is in the British Museum. If the way it serves right, the Rosetta Stone is only like maybe 60% of the stone complete. There's a whole bunch of it's missing, and you got to realize the guy who found it while at war. The odds of something like that staying intact get lower depending on what the situation is happening on that.
Yeah, it's not likely that the remaining pieces have survived, unfortunately, due to the shelling that was occurring at the time.
Theft and then just sort of hanging on to it, and but it's fairly complete. And we don't have even back then we have much better ways of preserving historical artifacts now than we did back then. Heck, film is preserved much better now than it was when it first came around.
Yeah, and even now, like, it takes years for some stuff to be inducted into the Preservation Society. I mean, for God's sake, the first Blade Runner film was only put in there within the last few years. And, I mean, if you think about that, that movie's like 35 years old.
It's not that old, and it's really important, especially for I want to say sci-fi, but that's not exact cyberpunk culture. And yet,
Cyberpunk, science fiction in a general sense, and cinematography, because like the way that was filmed, the things they did, the lack of dialogue in at least the later revisions where they removed the crap that was overlaid without Ridley Scott's permission as narration. Like, there's a lot of
Mhm.
explanation in just the world as you see it. Like, you're just witnessing the occurrence, not being told, and that can be very beneficial to a viewer to just experiencing it instead of being told about it.
Yeah, and there's various things for it, but the important part to note is preservation takes a while. In archaeology, they actually have a what they call the it's it's sort of a crisis that they have because the historical record can be kept with anything that's on there that's about 50 or plus years old. So if you're in, say, a dig site, you find a bunch of cups, stone tablets, stone works, and all these things have been preserved, and then you don't have it anymore, then you have to find a place to store it. Well, where do you store it? And at some point, that unfortunately, a lot of these things will get lost. It's you try to figure out which ones you get to keep, which one's the most important, and you hang on to it. Luckily, the Rosetta Stone is probably one of the biggest, most important works that you can find on that. But yeah, its significance is not underestimated. Like they have it in different games, like in Double Dragon, they have the Rosetta Stone in there just as a because it was more recognizable than how they originally titled it in Double Dragon 3.
Double Dragon 3, I almost made it out of the first room once.
Double Dragon 3, The Legend of Bimmy and Jimmy.
It's like all of them, though, right? Not just 3. They're all Bimmy. They're all Jimmy.
No. Double Dragon 3, Bimmy and Jimmy is straight up just Bimmy and Jimmy. It's like the other ones are Billy and Jimmy, but Bimmy and Jimmy, that's their legend.
What about Jimmy and Jammies?
Doesn't exist, bro.
Oh,
Oh, although since we're talking with ancient Greek and such, there is a thing out there. It's called the Sicelios' Epitaph. Sicelios' Epitaph is and we mentioned that in the video too. It's a tombstone that they found, which is the tombstone of Sicelios, but in reality, it's Sicelios' wife. And he wrote this on the tombstone a song on there, which is the epitaph for his wife, which is the rough translation on it is essentially that we sing this song and hopefully that others can remember the love that I have for my wife. Sicelius' epitaph is written in stone, and even better than that, it is the single oldest, most complete song that anyone has ever found.
It's true. Actually, I believe it has also been. I'm gonna pull it up real quick here because I think I remember seeing something on that, which is like when you were giving us like what we wanted to talk about in the process about this too. I think I actually remember reading up on this that there was the Greek language had been found because it's Greek text. I know that. And
yeah,
they had managed to translate it. I'm pulling it up right now. Here we go. Got it. Okay. So what it is like for a song itself, this is actually very poetic when you think about this. And this is a very, like, this is very nice to kind of read, seeing that's part of it. But it's like, while you live, shine, have no grief at all. Life exists only for a short while, and time demands its due. That's incredibly poetic for something like that. That's, a both a song and an epitaph in the process of it. So, like, seeing something like that and having to be fully translated, you're right. That is remarkable. You know what I mean?
Just
So,
let it. So I'm doing my due diligence. This isn't the oldest song ever. There's older ones. I think that the oldest one that on record is an old, like, Sumerian hymn, but it's not complete. Because when they found it, it was on a because a lot of these songs are written on manuscripts. Because we've had what is it, animal skin, papyrus, and there's even a set of like pulpwood that was carved in and such. But time and things will ravage these things, so you only get parts and pieces of it. That's what was the amazing thing about the Sicilios's epitaph, is it's complete.
Well, not just that, but the tablet also has like straight up um, melody melody notes on it. So it literally explains to you how to sing the lyrics of the song that's written on it.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, that's like crazy to think about.
Like, we have what scales and such on it. Imagine having to take a piece of rock and having to carve bit by bit each scale on that. That would be time consuming. So, but this guy did it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm good.
All written in ancient Greek. But the fact that he put in a melody and like timing and such, spot on. Oh, and if you're wondering, an interesting fun fact for that one, in nearly every copy game of Sid Meier's Civilization, that is the theme song that they play for the Greeks.
I believe that.
Is a different version of Sicilios's epitaph. And I always thought that was fun that they went into, I think it was after about 4 or 5. Sicilios's epitaph is the main theme song for the Greeks since the beginning. But about Civilization 5 or so, it's when every nation had a unique song that was fairly well known for its nation. The Japanese had its old song called Sakura. The United States, I believe, had Hail to the Chief. I forget what. I think France has one that's for during the French Revolution. But it's kind of neat to see that Civilization does this like extra step of work. And I know at that point they started adding in voice acting, but the voice acting for the leaders are meant to be whatever their native language is, preferably at the time, but not all the time. But I think it's neat that they've gone to those extra lengths, which they could easily have skipped that part. But yeah. So Sicilios's epitaph, old song, and if you've been to enough Ren fairs, at some point somebody has played it once or twice. Because to play it properly, you need a lyre for it. However, there are versions of it that is played on the guitar, and there's one I found with a version on it in a ukulele.
yeah, I'll have to get your brother to check that one out at some point or another, since he knows how to play the ukulele.
See if he'll do that, yeah. So one of the bigger, more famous ones is the Ten Commandments. Right? You don't have to be a theologian to understand. Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, has 10 commandments, reads it. I think he breaks it at the end because nobody's listening to him.
That sounds right. I think it or gets like struck by lightning or something.
I thought it was more like, it depends on what story it was supposed to be, because like basically I think it was something to do with the finger of God. Was that because he came down, did his spiel with the 10 commandments, and I think the finger of God is supposed to be the lightning bolt you're speaking about there, Brandon. That happens is that essentially God gets angry, strikes the 10 commandments right in front of everyone, and makes them believe in what Moses was saying, that this is the word of law of God. Essentially, is supposed to be something like that. See, unfortunately, my studies on Christianity, and
this is Judaism.
Like that, I think this is Christianity. Like this is Judaism. So it's like that's the thing. I was about to say that too. It's like because. But it's like my studies on this is unfortunately going to be very, I want to say it's there, but it's not there. You know what I mean? Because there's so much to learn about this. Like we're literally talking about one of the oldest most known piece of history that has been passed down amongst generation and generation of mankind. And while for the most part they have seen their own iterations of it, there
No, I
are
was trying to figure out
what's up.
because I was trying to
Oh,
remember what happened so here's sort of the thing on that. During Exodus, one of the things, well, Exodus is basically Moses leaving, Egypt, or leaving the Pharaohs, and so they travel for 40 days and 40 nights over to a Mount Sinai. When they're in the mountain, um, Moses goes up, has uh, gets the Ten Commandments written from um because the Moses said, "The Lord delivered unto me two tablets of stone written with the finger of God, and on them was written according to all the words which the Lord spoke with you in the mountain, out of the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly." So he came back with the stone tablets. After he has the stone tablets, he lets everyone knows what's happening with that. And after the events of this, and sorry, not really big of a theologian here, but I really should have read up on this. That's my bad. But most of this can be found in Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17, and then apparently also in Deuteronomy 5, chapter 4 to verse 4 to the 21. But anyway, so after he reached for that, what he does with the Ten Commandments, and comes up with a different artifact entirely. The Ten Commandments are put into the Ark of the Covenant, and it's sealed away in the Ark of the Covenant for it. So if you're watching old school like Indiana Jones and you're watching the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's what's inside the Ark of the Covenant.
good old fashioned face melting magic.
Well, that and untimely dew.
Well, it's untimely due to whoever uses it if they are not righteous.
Right?
Mm.
Which, I mean, I think a bunch of Nazis were definitely not righteous enough to cut their faces melted off by that sucker. So, I mean, weird coincidence, right? You're a Nazi, your face gets melted. What happens there?
To be fair, they had that shit coming.
There's a lesson to be learned there.
Yeah, very much so.
Also, I always found it hilarious because like they cut a scene from that movie, and it's one line, but it's one of those. It only makes sense if you've read enough of the Bible to understand the one scripture notice that was in that line that was cut, and it's something about the eyes, so that's why they closed their eyes and they were spared.
Yeah, it's very unexplained really to the viewer.
Yeah, because all you just know is that Indy is just saying, don't close your eyes, don't look at the thing at all. And that's it. Everybody else who's looking at it, face melted. But I like to also believe it's because, again, they're just a bunch of Nazis and their faces are to be melted.
Yeah. But because after Moses comes down from the mountain with the stone tablets for that, the people on there got kind of tired of having to travel. So some of them made a golden idol, so an engraved idol. And one of the commandments is, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images." And so they have a false god that they just basically made up on the spot right then and there because they're like, "I'm bored waiting for Moses."
Oh yeah.
And if you want to read up on that, that's fine. Now, that's how the Ten Commandments are on there, but it is still in both Old and New Testament for it. Or it's in the Old Testament is where it comes from. But you can't have a New Testament without an Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, there's like the Ten Commandments; those fall into a lot of different religious archetypes too. I mean, you've got it represented in the Quran as well as the Judeo-Christian religions and all of that. I mean, there's connections all over the place for it, and as a result, there's actually a lot of theories out there about the commandments. One of them specifically is that there's more than 10. We've only discovered 10.
The only way to find the rest of them would be to get your hands on the Lost Ark. So, good luck trying to find the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
That didn't exactly work out for a lot of people.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's just hard to believe that you would find so many connections to these tablets, because it is rumored that the Ten Commandments are on 2, that you would see these connections across so many different religions and have it only spread so far, only have so oh yeah, the commandments are mentioned in just this section right here of the Bible or of the Quran or of the Al-Anam or whichever religious sect you go with.
Mhm.
But it's like, I feel like these commandments would be sprinkled throughout the whole thing, not just in these specific areas in this small like gathering. So it's fair to assume there could be more, but again, we can't say definitively either direction because there's no proof one way or another.
Right. Yeah.
I forget if they put that. I know some places will have a statue of remake of the Ten Commandments in like carved somewhere in front of different courthouses and such.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
But yeah, that's sort of where you get your rule of law. Now, moving away from that one a little bit to go to something that is an interesting case is Egyptian cartouche rooms. Egyptian hieroglyphs are still a type of writing that Egyptians would do to explain different stories, different legends, and such. So they have what's called cartouche rooms, which is a big room, and from top to bottom is carved into the stone walls themselves the writings that they have for it, right? So the cartouche rooms are, which I always found interesting because their hardest part is figure out where page 1 is in a cartouche room. This door has 4 entrances. Where do I start? Where do I begin with this?
And the more you say cartouche room, the more I think you're saying cartoon room, and it's not inaccurate because they're all pictures.
Oh, what was it that the old meme saying was? Oh, is the internet and Egyptian hieroglyphs have in common? An awful lot of cats.
That's so true. It's also like my phone. There's a lot of cats on there.
It's anybody who's a cat lover will have a bunch of it. Makes sense to me.
I mean, who doesn't like cats?
I'll tell you who.
Maybe dogs?
I'll tell you who. Imhotep. Imhotep does not like cats.
That's true. Yeah, he did scream at a cat, and then Brendan Fraser shot him in the face.
And then he turned into a sand tornado and ran away.
Yeah,
So,
because he's a bitch.
So that reminds me of something. Is that because they have the Book of the Dead and the Book of Life there, right? Is that made of stone, or is it just gold inlay, or is it actually pages?
I think it was supposed to be gold inlay. I don't remember the entire details of that because I do know what you're talking about.
Because it opens like a book, but
Yeah,
it's like 3 pages.
It's a very heavy cover.
It'll weigh you down.
It's an excellent door stopper or, toe breaker, depending on how you want to drop that thing.
A little column A, a little column B,
You know what would be terrible for some of these things? Like, especially if you're in the cartouche room, right? You're carving away. You're cutting through all the stone. You get to a spot, and you have a spelling error. There's not a whole lot of erasing technology at this time.
I mean, at that point in time, you just
Slap some clay on it and wait a day. You'll be good.
hope for the best. Yep, hope for the best.
This should patch out, right?
Oh, geez. So that makes me wonder then. I mean, how many things are we misconstruing because they tried to patch it with clay and then the clay kind of dissolved and the stone left behind?
So stoneworks, especially at this level, is usually done in guilds, right? They have to be artisans. They have to be very highly skilled. And I think that's why. Because once you screw up, there's no undoing that. You have to start over.
Look, man, you can be skilled with the hammer and chisel and suck at spelling. I'm just saying.
It's true. Yeah.
Instead of white out, they had clay out.
And that won't exactly work because, like, depending on the type of stone that you have.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. The clay would just, like, fall apart over time compared to the solid stone they're using. So it's like, is that really supposed to be a picture of a human with a cat head? Or were they mistold that their friend had a cousin instead of a cat, so they had to patch it, but it didn't work right because it fell apart?
And what if you're, like, in Rome, okay? And in ancient Rome, they have, and this is where we get the origins of what trivias are, and triviadites, is trivia, which is where 3 roads meet. And what they'll do is put a fun fact there to whatever's the new town, a piece of that trivia, right? So you'd have the population, and you'd have, this is something interesting in this town. What if that's a typo, and they wrote it in stone?
God.
Imagine having all of history laughing at you down the road.
That's kind of what it's slowly turning out to be. It's like maybe it's like I'm thinking about this too. It's like because we're talking about like the typos and the errors that we make, and it's like, what do? Do you just use clay out? Like you got white out. Do you use clay out for that sort of thing? Is what we're going to call that. How do you do that for the giant nose of the Sphinx? Those things like they didn't get their noses, man. What happened? The guy screwed up so bad that it just chopped the nose off. Said, "Oh, we'll just go ahead and supply some clay." Oh. That ain't gonna work, is it?
See, that one, the Sphinx is a different story. That one got shot off by a cannon.
I was going to say Godzilla came up and said nose goes and grabbed it.
I also believe that one. Yep.
No, ironically, during this is somewhat related because this is during the Napoleonic era, the Napoleonic Wars. They used a couple of schmoes, I don't know, were working with wanting to, take a couple of pot shots with the cannon, and they used the nose of the Sphinx to sight their cannon.
So they nailed it. They're like, well, we're good.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm hearing here.
Well, a lot of these stoneworks and such actually got moved around, especially in northern Africa, because of the Napoleonic Wars. You got to realize that the Napoleonic Wars at this time would basically be the closest thing the world. Well, is considered one of the world's big world wars, like multiple nations having to compete against in
The true early World War.
because that comes up every so often with different places. The first big one I think is the Phoenician War, because that's Carthage against Rome. But you got to realize Rome is half of the Western known world at the time, and Carthage is the other half. They will fight against each other. So that's a big world war there. And then you have the Napoleonic Wars. Technically, the U.S. Revolutionary War is a world war because the U.S. side of it is only like one tiny chunk of it. But to keep England, which is still a major power at that time, at bay, it's fighting wars all over the place because it's all over the world. And this is all before you get to actually World War One, which is a mess.
To put it lightly.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, cartouche rooms.
Yeah, cartouche rooms back on track. Now that we've had our fun with that.
So the reason why I bring up cartouche rooms is because one of my favorite TV series out there is Stargate. And the SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, and Stargate Universe, but I'm not as big of a fan of that one for other reasons. But in Stargate, science fiction series, and they go from planet to planet, Planet of Hats, we just sort of change it up for exploring. In Stargate, they try to do their best to explain it all. And this is sort of you'll find that in like things like Star Trek or the Orville or other science fiction shows that do that. The better ones will have some sort of in-world universe reason for why they're doing what they're doing. Now, in the first episodes, they go back to Abydos, the first planet that they've been to from the movie. And the reason why they know the instructions for Abydos is because they have a cartouche tablet that they found from 1912 when they found the Stargate. Now, next to that, though, when they go to Abydos, there is a full, what's their version of a map room. It's a big, giant room filled with cartouches with all these other symbols. They scanned in those symbols, put it into their system, so that way they could try to calculate where to put these to work. And it's something like they actually put a ratio of between that and a program that they designed, it would come up with about one new viable address one to two viable addresses every day. This is your in-universe reason why, hey, there's that planet. Hey, there's that planet. Hey, there's that planet. Hey, there's that planet. Later in the series, they get a third series of coordinates for it, but they're all coordinates, which is interesting for it. If anyone's ever read one of those old Rand McNally maps for it, that's basically your version of here's the coordinate. If you have a coordinate on a map, you know where to go for it. But you kind of have to be very specific with those. So those are some of the bigger ones, and these are the older ones on it. So here's sort of a weird, funny story type thing. I was working on the stone tablets video for the channel. I got to a point where like, okay, I seriously need to stop, take a break. I'm not going to bother with this for a while. Go in, and I put in Fallout New Vegas, right? Start playing Fallout New Vegas, and I end up at the town of Boulder, which in New Vegas, and I think Boulder and also the real city is right next to the Hoover Dam. And in there, they have a giant stone tablet written with all the names that fought this giant battle for the Hoover Dam. And I'm sitting here going, fine, universe, I got the sign. I'll get back to work.
No relaxing for you, not allowed.
Well, those kind of tablets tend to show up often. Probably the most famous one is in the real life version of it is the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Where they have names of all people who passed away during the Vietnam conflict. Those are just big epitaph tomes, and that's probably one of the most famous ones. But it's not the only one. Like different nations all over the world have stuff like that. But yeah, so we're talking NCR in Fallout New Vegas. This is a game that takes place in 2055. or 2188, so way hundreds of years in the future, and they're still writing stuff in stone because it'll stick.
I mean, yeah. On that same note, there's a more recent, well, I guess recent in terms of being put to visual animation, but it's an older story in the Gundam universe, would be Gundam Unicorn. The whole plot of that OVA series literally revolves around a stone tablet, because it's the charter for the Universal Sensory. When they were beginning the Universal Sensory and ending the Anonymity, or however it's pronounced, they had made this charter decreeing all kinds of things about, this new unified existence of Earth, because they had now started reaching well beyond the stars. In this process, though, there's an attack on the station where they're all literally engraving with laser the signatures of all these, politicians at the time, and they destroyed the colony this was being done on. But one person who was not on the colony got to see this happen and saw the charter stone floating in space, and he thought to collect it. And because of that, everybody on the planet was terrified that he could release the true charter that had all of the listed notations, including the one that stated, should there be a space optimized subspecies of human that comes into being, they would be given priority to help guide humanity into this intergalactic era. And everybody, the reason why that colony was destroyed was so people would not, get to see that etched on the charter. They didn't want that information out there. They were afraid of change, if you will. So this dude just sat on it, and he didn't make any unreasonable demands, really. I mean, Earth went on doing its thing. He just wanted to be in a good state. So when it's brought up that, oh, there's a thing that could change the course of history, everybody's fighting to try and find this thing. It's what the hell is it that they're talking about? And it's the true finalized charter that has 2 extra notes on it, as opposed to the one that everybody was taught was real. So kind of like the 10 Commandments thing, and the theory that there could be additional commandments out there.
I'm trying to think of some other games though too that also have the usage of stone tablets as well. And I mean, oh shoot,
A weird one to find is Pokemon actually has them. Isn't it the Unknown?
Yep. Unknown are literally a written language on stone tablets in the second game.
I thought that was fun to deal with.
It was. There's even Pokemon cards that are written with Unknown.
I believe that. Yeah. There's also
it's a nightmare to read.
If I remember correctly, there's also there's also a Legend of Zelda that had the stone tablet. That's actually called the Stone Tablets, which I think was the Japanese only one that you could only play back in the day, way back in the day, when I think it's the Super Famicom or the Famicom itself had internet capability. You were only allowed to play it on select weekends. You know what I'm talking about, right?
It's a Teleview.
Yeah, it's called the BS The Legend of... we covered it in the video.
Yeah, we covered it in the video.
It was BS The Legend of Zelda, which was annoying to cover because that's its official title, BS The Legend of Zelda, Agents of Tablets.
The Legend of Zelda.
For the longest time, I thought that was some kind of weird internet joke because it's BS, but no.
No, broadcast satellite, The Legend of Zelda.
Mhm.
Because you had to use the Satellaview at certain times because they literally live broadcasted narration over your play.
That is super cool.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember something like that. And then, of course, I'm also thinking, too, I don't know if this would technically count or not, but Kyle, maybe you can correct me or not on this, too, because I know you played this game with me as well. But Seventh Saga, do you remember that one?
Well, with Seventh Saga, I do remember the title screen having a stone tablet.
I vaguely remember this title too. Not very well, but...
But insane, I want to remember, because it's the whole premise behind it was collecting magical runes. And you could argue that magical runes are, by proxy, affiliated with stone tablets, because, I mean, it's a rock, it's got cravings in it, it's got magical cravings, it's got carvings in it, it's got hunger, too. it hungers to be found. Anyways, but it's a rock. It's got carvings in it. It has magical powers to it, and a lot of what you tell them with when you're talking about stone tablets generally tend to have their own, mysticism about them. We talk like the Epic of Gilgamesh. We talk the Ten Commandments, Rosetta Stone, the whole fact that you can literally decipher language using the Rosetta Stone was a when you think about it itself, and its own thing is a mystical proxy of itself. And when you think about that, so it's like you could argue that too. Like that's another video game right there that also have that. And I'm trying to say, like, I know any of the Dark Souls that are out there, any of the Souls games that are out there will have stone tablets. So you see these things commonly used across more fantasy based games, but they do exist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, an interesting one is for what is it? Why can't I think of its name? I used to play it much. It's that Viking game, kind of, that you can do a lot of crafting in. Valheim, yeah. So Valheim has rune stones that you find throughout the world for it too. Well, let me backtrack. So stones that have written carvings on it, you look at it, and it'll give you some instructions for the part of the game. But the reality is that's actually what's better known as runestone, because they're written in the runic stone with writings from the runic language. So yeah, that's what runestones typically are. That's the difference between that and a regular stone. Is runestones have runic writing into it. So yeah, you have things like runic writing, the Greek alphabet, cuneiform. So the thing is that a lot of these have sharp edges because they're easier to carve into things for it when they do the writing. So in the Greek alphabet, it's like things like omega you stay away from as much as you can use it because looks like a horseshoe. But if you go with runic writing, they're angles and angular lines in different positions. The reason why they do that is because runic writing is meant to be done on stone, so it's easier to carve in a straight line than it is to make any kind of actual design for it. The Greeks just were more proficient in it, so they could do more artsy things into it, which is why they have different lettering. But cuneiform is a type of lettering that Babylonians used.
Yeah,
same thing. Very angular, very straight, much association with a bunch of straight lines, because you can carve it into stone and specifically clay very easily. It's kind of how we have the origins of tick marks. So if you're wanting to know a crazy guy with tick marks, what is it? Mr. Zaz from the Batman series has a bunch of tick marks on his arms for everything when he's killed. But yeah, cuneiform started that way, which is use tick marks for numbering. So yeah, see, runic stones, that's what a rune stone is. But yeah, you'll see them all over the place. If you see anything referenced to like Viking lore and such, there's probably one that's in there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't like stone carvings and stuff like that was strictly was like strictly a part of like just ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian timeline in Mesopotamia and things like that as well. It's like
we're still doing it
pretty much as long as you have the ability, how to hammer and chisel, and pretty much it's not a foreign concept. It's just a dead one in this day and age, obviously, but still, yeah.
Well, semi-dead. They're still doing it. It's just not as practical. See, what we're talking, one of the reasons why these are in there is because they're done as memorials for like tombstones, which are meant to last for a long period of time. But also the creation and the production of paper and other writing things for it, it gets better with time. Like paper is a big deal and difficult to make those writings because it's easier to make one big memorial, carve the writing in there, put it somewhere in the town that everybody can see it, and we call it a day. It takes a long time. It's a lot of effort to do that. And then all of a sudden, the printing press gets invented, which changes that. So you could just print everything into sheets of paper and hand that out to people instead.
So, question on that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Were the original printing presses done with metal-based letters, or were they etched out of stone for their pressings?
I think it was metal. Because they wanted it to be.
Were they cast?
They're casted because they need a very particular shape for it.
Okay.
But you could do it with stone.
I mean, what is a metal if not a refined rock that they form into the stone?
That's what iron is.
Exactly. So, argumentatively, stone tablets are being used repeatedly with individual letters to create the works that we have read for years.
That's very true, yeah.
Until they started using inkjet printers.
You go from stone to get to everyone, then paper production, and then from there you go to pulp is the next big one, which is in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is why we have what's called pulp novels, because paper was so much easier to make from this cheap pulp that you can now make production of paper books really easily. Other types of paper, and then you get into computers. Once you get to the computer age for the jet printer, it makes it way easier to print. And then we have things like Kindles and such and just your cell phone, which is all digital. But yeah, it looks like from what I can find so far, some of the original printing presses were mostly made of iron and metal, because in order to keep its shape.
Hey, iron is made from ore, which is just a rock. So you know what? It's a written stone tablet. It's got a letter on it.
You'd have golden writing if you want to. In that case, it's still technically a stone tablet. Well, anything written in that.
I'm gonna go outside, get a rock, and just like smack it with a hammer, and like there, stone tablet.
A lot of rock use for stone tablets and such nowadays is mostly for artwork and art.
Yeah,
there's no practical reason for it anymore.
No,
it's fun though. I like it.
Lost art form that's found occasionally.
Well, it comes up once in a while, like the Georgia Guidestones. That's all stonework that's done there.
Yeah,
because the Georgia Guidestones is a weird thing, but it wasn't intended as an art piece. So it's probably the last big stonework that's meant for a purpose, because the Guidestones are designed to last for a long time. In the event of apocalyptic nature, we have something to give people hope and instruction. That's its original thing with the Guidestones on that. And from what I last checked, they are being rebuilt for it. But yeah, you put things in stone to keep them up and going. That's basically all I've got for the stone tablet stuff. Does anybody else have any other examples and things?
I wish I could have brought more to the table on this one, to be honest with you. But past that, though, not really on my end.
Yeah, this isn't going to be one of our longer ones, mostly because stone tablets, their biggest thing is just you write into them and you keep it in stone, and it just lasts a long time.
This is true.
And it's a dying art form, but it's not a dead art form. People will still make these art type this for whatever reason, or just to imprint that this is going to last a long, long time.
It's one of those things that still impacts us to this day, but we just don't think about.
Right.
The amount of stories and fiction that's written with a stone tablet in there is massive, and they're all over the place. You throw a rock at anything science fiction, at some point they're going to deal with a stone rock with writing in there. Even as fantastical as they get, sometimes it's just good old fashioned stone writing is what they need. So yeah, I think that is actually about it for this. When this comes out, will be the next episode that will come out for us will be on September 16th. So until then, thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. This is Gaming Theater Podcast logging out. And I hope you enjoyed this EXP boost. Bye everybody.
Peace.
Toodles.
Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. Our cover art is by Adam Parker. You can find him at ParkerGFX on Twitter. If you want to send us some financial support to help with producing things for Gaming Theater, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. It helps us out. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.